And give her a hand of applause. Over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jacques. It's lovely to be here tonight, to be reading solo. As you said earlier, I'd read as part of a collective of us, reading as part of an anthology. Um, just a little word of warning, I'm going to have load shedding at 8 o'clock, which is fine because I have a million and one gadgets. But my aircon is going to go off, which I've got on because we've got a heat wave and I didn't want noise outside. So there might be a bit of a bang and I might get a huge fright when that happens. So just to warn you, but otherwise, everything else, the lights are long lasting and I've got all sorts of things. Then I might just pause and do all my little things. Okay, what I thought of doing tonight was to read from my three published collections. There's sometimes a thematic theme that goes through all of their collections. And then I've got some newer poems that I've been writing since my last collection was published in 2015. I do have enough poems for a new collection. I've put together different ones since 2015 when that was published, but I'm still revising, refining, and I think what I had put together previously, I need to change and give a new title and just rework the whole thing and just see where I am. So I don't know yet when or what I'm doing with that collection, so I won't talk any more about that. So the first collection that I had published was, I'll just show you here, was A Life Stripped of Illusions. As you can see, it was a book published with Tatamkulu Africa. This is the one that won the Sanlam Award. Tatamkulu won for the published section and I won for the unpublished section. And then Sanlam published us in a collection together. And I was 22 when I won this award, which was wonderful. I didn't know anything about winning awards and the literary world, and Tatamkulu was really quite helpful when I met him in Grahamstown, as it was then when we went down to receive the awards. So the first poem I'm reading from this collection is Like a Fish. I withdrew myself like a fish into the cold, clammy waters of the Atlantic Ocean. I stuck on glittering fins, made of sequins, to hide my nakedness and vulnerability. And then it happened. Miraculously, people took me for a fish. I went along with it. It took care of the sordid business of dry land. But then it also happened that I had to come up to breathe. I shot through the sparkling surface, gashing through the layers of turquoise and silently waving reeds. I confronted the sunlight. When I looked back, I found my fins and gills had floated loose. A long trail of glittering pieces led from the depthless, dark interior. The sun was a punch in the stomach of white as I breathed. As I mentioned, this collection was published when I was 22. So there are some poems here that are clearly poems of a much younger person. For example, the poem Turning 20. I turned 20 in the heat of a busy Sunday. I couldn't believe I had come this far, would go further. This year, I'm going back to my roots, but how I got here, I don't know. How it is that I can stand at the kitchen door, looking on a pale blue dusk, I can't say. How I got here is a mystery. How that 10-year-old, or that 15-year-old, how all those ghosts coalesced into me. At times I feel they still exist somewhere, taking hold, still growing, still struggling to be what each age wants to be. Age now taps lightly on my skin. I smooth it away menacingly. The years ahead torture me with their expectations. If I peer hard enough, I see me at 29, a vague shape highlighted by sun. Her face is obscured. She's not going to tell me what she knows. And then another poem that talks to the age that I was then, but still with an eye on the future, which I always seem to have had, as you'll see also in another poem from Beyond Touch. This one is called The Promises We Make. Lying in bed together, we make promises. We promise that we'll still love each other when we're 60, with age spots and failing hearts. We think of that. We promise we'll love each other through marriage and childbirth, and friends' divorces, and children leaving home. We stare at the ceiling, iron-pressed and painted white, and promise each other these things while running our hands over unlined cheeks and smooth stomachs.
Oh.
I spoke earlier in one of the poems about going back to my roots. And at the end of that year, which was 1991, I went back to Spain. I hadn't been back to Spain since we'd left when I was about 3.5, 4. And I went to England, I went to Spain, and I went to Paris. And this poem is about what I saw in Paris on the metro. And it's called Le Métro. Je m'appelle Jean-Louis. I am without work, without money. I am all alone in the world. The train rattles on. Around a curve, bodies sway and hit each other, coats flung open. We stare impassively ahead, ignoring Jean-Louis in grubby jacket, hair unbrushed. So I'm appealing to you all to give me something extra so I can get on in the world. We stare impassively ahead. I do the same after a day and a half in Paris. My face reflected in glass that's black against the pitch-dark tunnels, as blank and bored as the rest. Thank you all for listening to me. Down the coach he holds out his hand. There's silence as he gets to the end with his closed fist, stands at the door, waiting for the next stop. We get off together, and while I'm confronted by the bleeding rash of another beggar's face stretched on a bench, Jean-Louis gets onto the next coach, and in the same even, unexpected tone, he begins, Je m'appelle Jean-Louis. Then, when I say I went back to my roots, I was born in Malaga, Spain, to a Spanish father and a South African mother. And I hadn't been back to Spain, and I hadn't met my family, my Spanish family, since we had left when I was 3.5, 4. So I was a stranger in Spain, so to speak. It was all very new to me, and it was all quite eye-opening, the Spanish lifestyle. And I tried to describe it, and I tried to capture some of it in a poem called Malaga Night. The cars slide up and down the street, strong yellow headlights, sharp hooters, Christmas decorations along the broad avenues, Feliz Navidad between the stars and balls, cakes in the shop, a quiet sea down the road, black and calm, tipped with whitecaps and phosphorescence. Spanish women, friends of my grandmother, greet me with kisses on my cheeks, expecting me to know the language. A cousin translates, then pulls me away. The facade of El Corte Inglés, lit up in flashing green lights, a windmill as part of the festivity. It turns alongside a nativity theme, plastic models stuck in eternal happiness. The department store is cluttered by shoppers who shove, dresses done up in pink feathers and red spangles. Nuria pushes them away. The same frustration as we are caught in a car jam, have to park in the mud and wait for the muddle to sort out. So we turn on the radio. An unintelligible language spills out in a song I've never heard. The same gearboxes and human voices as we eat supper at 10 o'clock, and everyone thinks that's normal. The same slices of white bread cut evenly, thin wedges of cheese spread thinly, and yet I don't know where I am. And then staying with the Malaga theme, we celebrated New Year's in Malaga, which again was a new experience for me. Everything was new. New Year's in Malaga. We drank hot chocolate as thick as ice cream and sweeter than anything I've ever tasted. Dipped our sticks of churros into the steamy mixture in a silence interrupted by a few odd remarks. We were too tired to talk. We'd been dancing all night. The hard white of fluorescence picked out the pock marks of flesh. It was 7 in the morning. The place shuddered with stopped chatter going on. The waiter hurried, hardly bothering to take note of people's faces. Then we walked in the streets again, the lights an eerie yellow glow over deserted lanes. Other people walked, also catching taxis and saying goodbye. Paseo Redding was dark and silent. The taxi dropped me opposite the bullring. I said goodbye to Rafa and watched the dawn creep up while everyone slept. I'm going to read now from my second collection, The Fire in Which We Burn. This was published by Diehard Press, which is run by Gary Comiskey, and I see he's in the audience somewhere. So yeah. So this was published when in 2001. I'm forgetting when I never forget dates. Yep, 2000, I'm right. Okay, so this is a poem called Joburg 98. A young boy, a first-year university student, takes a bus home through a scuzzy part of town. He looks out the windows. Slumped against the doorway, a man bleeds into his own blood. He's just been shot dead. For no reason, really, except that a gang, having robbed a shop, still had a bullet left in a gun. The dead man bleeds. In his hand, blue cigarette smoke still curls from a lit cigarette. Paying an account in a smart department store, I stand behind a couple. She, short, fattish, plain, young. He, taller, fatter, plain, young. For a long time, he caresses the hard cartilage of her ear, round and round the seashell shape. Talking, loving. She looks demure. He is so tender. I look away. The line shuffles forward. So those were two experiences of Johannesburg in 1998. It's shocking that such violence was already quite prevalent there, but I think it's always been quite a violent city. Where we're at. It's where we're at. Trees coming out of breasts, men dancing naked, buds growing out from necks where heads should be. And so we flower on, tentatively reaching out to the new century, trying to be adults. Dancing into the fantasy of lives dreamed up for ourselves, we find bits and pieces floating by. We watch them from office windows. Searching for the adult in each of us, we dance, treeless, headless, grasping at this new century, fantasy spurting where blood should be. And the final poem in this collection is called Vein. Vein. Veins are blue ropes in her hands, thick roots to fingers, pulsing the heat through the car, the late afternoon sunlight, the song on the radio. They do not talk, waiting for the song to end. As she traces her veins, she remembers coffee in a restaurant, a hard cake crust, he stirring sugar into cappuccino foam. Are you sure I'm the right one? Yes, in most respects. In what respects? Well, that you've never said it. What? He shifts. That I've never said you're the one. Yes. How can I know? I've had so little experience. Isn't it an instinctive, intuitive thing, he asks. This, the thick blue vein, the silence between songs, the sweat, the hot air trapped in the car. This hangs between them. She sighs. It is time to go in, cook supper, eat, forget about this. A moment from an afternoon in a restaurant, the uncomfortable truth of the future bared before them in a few awkward sentences. And now I'm going to move on to Beyond Touch, which is this collection. This was published, it was a joint publication with Gary Comiskey of Diehard Press and Colleen Higgs of Majaji Books. So as I said, there are some thematic themes or things running through both of the collections. I did go back to Malaga after having been back at the age of 20. I went back in my 30s a couple of times. And I was a stranger in Malaga because I still wasn't Spanish. I still do live in South Africa. I don't really speak the language. I have a very, very basic 2-year-old understanding of the language. In fact, one of my aunts who doesn't speak English, because a lot of my family do obviously speak English, one of my aunts says when she talks to me as a 2-year-old. And that's the level of my Spanish. And the level of answering is even worse than a 2-year-old. But I can kind of understand very simple stuff, but nothing philosophical and nothing about tomorrow. It's all present. So this is Pet Shop in Malaga. It's the kittens in the window that draw us together. A grandmother with grandchildren and me passing through. We bend close. She shows the children the fluffy animals, and we all smile together indulgently. Bonita, I say, and the woman's face falls. Just a fraction, it's barely perceptible, but now she knows. I've opened up my mouth, revealed I'm an extranjera, a stranger. She scurries away into the night, and I too move on. This is also set in Malaga. Woman in a pink bikini. On a Saturday afternoon in June, I walk the streets of Malaga. I stop to take photographs. The humid heat has barely begun, and already I feel slowed by these beginnings of summer. The walk takes time. I pass a ship in harbour, take relief under the broad avenue of trees along Paseo del Parque. I phone South Africa, wanting to go home early. I shout against the noise of the city's buses. I walk, hot, backpack heavy with camera, snapping desultory photographs. The sun is white and harsh. I'm not capturing what I see. Along a promenade by the beach, the palm trees pattern the walkway. It's lunchtime. The beach restaurant is packed with people as I pass. There are oily, cooked fish smells. The beach is full of clusters of people, friends, or family in this tight-knit society. Beneath the cold beach shower, a woman stands. Her voluptuous body wears a pink fluorescent bikini. She could be me. I watch. Her boyfriend takes her in his arms, encircles her waist. They're both smiling, laughing, loved, in love. His embrace is gentle, full, all-encompassing. I watch like the voyeur I am now, here. It goes on. Water, beach, the shower spills. They laugh and move away. My photos show the blurred, pixelated images of two people in love, embracing. But they were taken too far away, or I used the wrong lens. You can barely make out the couple on the beach in June, lost among the family groups. On one of my trips to Spain, I was very fortunate. I worked for the Sunday Independent as their lifestyle editor, and I went on trips, which was fantastic. It was a real perk of that job. And one of my trips was to take a river cruise down the Danube River. And when my mom heard that I was going to be going to Munich, she said to me, well, you know, Dachau's there, and she thinks everybody should see a concentration camp in their lives. And whoops, there we went with the power, but here I am. And she said everybody should see a concentration camp in their lives. And I agreed, and I did want to see one. But the effect of seeing one is startling, life-changing. It stays with you, and yet you try and push it away. Well, that is what I tried to show in this poem. Just going to turn on another light here. So Dachau, the statue of starving granite figures, clashes against the blue Bavarian sky. I stop there, pause, can't go on any longer, hit delete. Germany slides past me. Tall, long-storied houses line the banks of the Danube. We drift at night. I imagine I lived long ago, and that I row a boat with my goods past houses shuttered to me. I can't look anymore. Download, then hit delete. Usually I check photos, look one more time, but not this time. Days later, and I can't look. I thought it had not affected me, walking around taking notes for a story, taking photos of a place that is not beautiful, listening to a guide tell us of the horrors. Only once, alone in the cement corridor of the VIP prison unit, did I feel it. What went on there? And I almost ran towards the light, coming from the door ajar at the end of the corridor. Even at night, alone in a hotel room, with the TV in German for comfort and an empty bowl of tomato soup, I did not feel it. Then suddenly aboard a luxury river liner, with too much food served and prepared, I can't look. Months later, the words still won't come. The article is unwritten. There are too many words to express it. By day, I feel the long-forgotten brown buildings, long torn down. At night, I can only imagine what I'd feel. Churches, a synagogue line the end of it. Prayers for peace, prayers to cleanse the ground. There's a statue, yet another, of a prisoner, skinny in his oversized coat. A homage to the dead, a warning to the living. And for a while, I was writing poems based on photographs and paintings. And I did always say where I'd got the photographs from. But for this one, Kissing the Wall, I somehow did not. I have a very vague feeling that it's in a book that I still have. And when I've got some time, I'm actually going to look at it. And if the poem's ever republished or published in somewhere else, I'm going to correct it. But for now, I have no credit for this. Kissing the Wall. The woman's face is unadorned, slightly wrinkled. Her head is covered in a pink and white scarf. Zooming in, the camera watches the slightly pursed lips as, oblivious to the world, she tenderly inclines her head, eyes closed, and in an act of faith kisses the wall. In that instant she releases her longing and the pain. The wall a forgiving, deserving lover. You can't see her body, only her passion as she leans in, oblivious, lost in the seal of her kiss. The elephant is unhappy. The ground is squelchy underfoot, the grass sparse, wet. A dog is chained to a table. I am on guard is a sign around a caravan. At the next caravan, a woman holding a cigarette retreats to its shuttered interior. The chained dog finds shelter beneath the camping table, its tail between its legs. In the fields by the main road, the elephants have attracted onlookers. A mother holds her child. The elephants are still silent. An elephant blows dust onto herself, burrowing a hole into the ground as she sucks up dust, blows it, uses her trunk to enlarge a hole at her feet. Her hide is wrinkled grey. Beyond her, cars stream along the wide, sun-bleached road. She is tethered by foot, held by a stake in the ground. Men sort hay and grass. The elephant moves, her ears flap. Her trunk grasps into the air. She sways. The chain stretches. Just before she reaches the end of the chain's pull, she stops, sways, knows she can't go any further. Her trunk reaches out again. Her big body sways slightly. A foot moves forward. Silently we walk away. The ground is squelchy underfoot, and the caravans are inscrutable. You can't see through their small, lace-covered windows. And as I had in the other collection about a relationship and small disharmonies in a relationship, here's another one, a perfectly cooked meal. My head on your chest is not satisfactory. We move apart. You go outside. I stay indoors, trying to read a book. Later, we cook supper together. We are coordinated, synchronized. You scatter potatoes in a dish. I cut meat. We are chatty, but slightly rushed. The food, steam, sizzling red marinade sauce. The brightness of green avocado pear. The yellowness of mealies. The noise of water running as I wash dishes. These ordinary, everyday domesticities point towards something else, or point away from the disharmonies and doubts. We have a perfectly cooked meal, eaten while watching a half Japanese video. His birthday. Rain pours, Sunday Eve, it thunders. There's a big table of people, a waiter brings them birthday cake. The couple eat fish. She has a feeling it will be the last time they celebrate like this. There's no cake, no candle, simply rivers of water outside, and the years they have known each other. He has filter coffee for dessert, she a red cappuccino. She takes a doggy bag home. A decade is drawing to a close. Before the day begins. Before the day begins, you're there. You're there in the lines of poetry I read, in the book of poems given to me for a recent birthday present. You're there in the memory of your head, bent towards that of my black-faced cat, telling her she's beautiful. Your vowels, ruby red in the night air. It is your voice that comes to me, here now, the vowels, the whispers somehow elongating, acquiring breath. Before the day begins, you're the unreal, surreal lights of the aurora borealis, misting into northern skies, in the place where you feel at home. Before the day begins, your hair, tinged by highlights and stray grey, the smoothed, flat abdomen, the whispers of softness in your breasts, and the playfulness that enters your eyes when the sadness isn't looking. Beyond touch. There are intimacies beyond touch, I am learning. There are intimacies that reach beyond trust. I am learning, I am trying to remember the lesson as I lean my face into the softness of your smooth neck and feel you pulling back into the responsibilities of your life. So instead we talk about parents, my mother's failing eyesight, and solutions that will appear, even if we have no idea how. Of babies, adoption, hot December nights, a future that mirages into the present. I try to claim them, lay a stake for the future as I say goodbye. We kiss lightly on the lips, and I'm gone, trying to hold your words, your thoughts, your face, as the tires slip past you, you nesting somewhere. One of those nights, those violent nights, you know what I mean, when the heater glows into the last days of winter, and the new clock ticks on relentlessly, and the cats snore away, and it's deathly quiet. Here alone, waiting, watching, wondering, doubts spilling, pouring on, bubbling like oil spills, hands dirty, nails black with this glue. I can't control the gush. Yes, on one of those nights, I see you in profile. It's the future, say, 20 years from now. It's recognizably you, even though your features have softened and lined. I'm trying to figure it out. If I will know you then, if this tiny vision into the future means anything. And some of whether that meant anything or that vision is going to be answered in these poems written after that collection is published. These are all on big pieces of paper. So getting myself together. Okay. Rounds of rice paper. I wrote our names on rounds of rice paper, watching as the river dissolved our bonds. I called to the water. 2 ducks floated past. I walked on. The half moon cast her light on me. The palm reading. How is it that I can spend this Sunday alone, and am glad for it, and yet I'll always miss you? Yesterday a palmist said that I will never have another relationship again. And while my soul sank at the words, they didn't feel old. I had felt the truth of that before. Even as we argued and tried again, even as we parted and you said something about seeing me in the future on the arms of another woman. Silent then. I did not say, what about me? Seeing you with another woman. The palmist, tall, grey-haired, still commanding an active presence, took my small hands in his large ones and uttered the words as a prophet might, as though this were the absolute truth. I couldn't concentrate on the words that followed, could only feel his large hands on mine, and try to imagine the life I had seen for myself, a life without the intimate touch of a lover's hands. The beautiful things. On her birthday, my mother recalls an old love affair of hers while asking about you. She says, remember the beautiful things in your life, even if they ended. Smoke. Why does the smoke drifting from the holes in the closed incense holder bring you back to me? The smoke snakes across the bed, drifts high toward the ceiling, as cigarette smoke might. I expect shapes to emerge out of the curls and twists of it. Perhaps worlds will be revealed to me. They never are. That is a fantasy. Why are you so present when you've been absent now for so long? Still the smoke holds you, captures you, briefly returns to me as I enter another winter without you. And I imagine the smell of it in your hair, and imagine you now with another one. I'm starting to write poems about when I was a child, which surprises me because I've never written poems about when I was a child. That was just not a time that I ever revisited in poetry. I wrote 2 and they were published in stanzas. And I'm writing others. Memories come up. I suppose I'm making sense of the past as I've never had the feeling or the need to do before. So I'm going to read 2 of the poems from the past. The one is called 9 Years Old 1. We're allowed Coca-Cola as a special treat in tiny square wine glasses on Saturday nights. How we savour the sparkling black drink, wanting more, yet knowing that's all. No wonder, in a family of 3 children and 2 parents, a 1-litre bottle doesn't go very far. I, of course, come from a family of 1 child, 1 mother. Coke goes further then, although there's more silence. I just want to correct what I said. These weren't published in stanzas, they were published in the Odd magazine, an online magazine. 9 Years Old 2. The mother of 3 wears a costume at the pool to cover her stretched stomach. She has booked a tummy tuck in a few weeks' time. She tells my mother, who holds her own stomach in, my mother diets constantly, smokes cigarettes, nibbles sparingly through the day, eats more salads than potatoes. My mother's friends smoke cigarettes with her, tan darkly, buy white bread, make pies, drink far too much coffee, and run on adrenaline and the hope of male glances, comparing whose breasts are perkiest. Another friend, young and single, not 39 and divorced, sits at the edge of the pool and also holds her stomach in. This is so that she'll attract a man, she explains to me. Another friend of my mother's asks me to rub suntan lotion on all over her back. Everyone wants to tan. No one has heard of sunblock. I flinch from touching the woman's moles, which are scattered along the top of her back. We eat watermelon after lunch and swim off the sticky residue in the blue pool. It is such a long time ago now, 1981, and summer. I can still feel the watermelon's sticky juice on my fingers. And then a final poem which speaks of peace and conclusions of a sort. I suppose we have conclusions all through our lives, beginnings and conclusions. It's kind of what I'm taking from life, that life is a series of changes and ups and downs. Green tea morning. The steam from the kettle mists up the window. The green tea seeps. The sky is grizzly grey. The cats have gone back to sleep, and I am waiting for the day to begin. This is a time in the future, in the past, as I stand there, counting out vitamin pills, warming a muffin, spreading butter, topping it with cheese. It is a time like I had before, and a time like I never had before. The glass cup turns green with the tea. I stir the sugar granules away, and they dissolve as I expected them to. This is a time so long ago, and so recent, that it is not a time at all. Thank you. That's the end of my reading. Thank you.
I'm not sure you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you now.
That's wonderful. That was such a beautiful, amazing reading. I wonder if you can all unmute yourselves for a moment and give Arja a warm hand of applause.
Oh, thank you.
Like,
Thank you so much.
you know, you can't always hear the applause on Zoom, but I can assure you it's there.
Okay. No,
I'm
thank
going
you.
to I'm going to hand over now to someone who can actually see the hands in the room, but I'm sure there'll be people who want to ask questions. If I can, yeah.
I just want to say thanks, Christine, for your chat. I'm just looking at the chat.
Oh,
Thanks.
if I can maybe start us off, you know, I was so moved by Kissing the Wall. I just think it's such an incredibly moving poem, and it struck me how many poems tonight that you chose have you standing on a threshold, you know, trying to look at yourself in 10 years' time, picturing someone who may or may not be you about to enter a relationship, you know, trying to infiltrate into a strange society, and how often the poems are records of not quite being in the right room, and yet you absolutely take us there. You know, you show us how that feels to be just a little bit too far away from the action.
Mm.
And I don't know if you want to say something about that. I think, and then there are poems that are not like that. You know, like the one where you become a fish, the early one, and there are later ones like that. I don't know if you. It's more an observation than a question. I don't know. Does poetry help you? Is poetry a way to enter that room, or is it a kind of a way of is it a way of? Do you think it breaks down those barriers in a way?
I think in poetry, that's when I explore that part of myself. I don't seem to explore it in fiction, for example. In fiction, I'm quite, in my fiction, the ones that the stories I write, I'm quite deep into those stories and the protagonists are all part of the action, or if there's a first person narrator, I, in inverted commas, is in the action. So I think in poetry, that's where I can explore those moments, because those are moments. And, I do think there are moments in all of our lives. But I think with myself, I'm drawn to write about that because I do straddle this South Africa-Spain divide. And
Yes.
yet I'm not, I mean, I have the Spanish surname, I have the Spanish passport, I have the Spanish looks, yet I'm not Spanish in terms of the fact that I haven't grown up there, I haven't lived there, I don't speak the language. Um, and yet I'm always trying to go back into it. And I mean, one of these days I'm not saying I'm going to immigrate to Spain, but I'm definitely going to try to spend 3 to 6 months there and learn the language. As I say, I've tried so often in this country, and it's quite difficult when you're not surrounded by Spanish. So I think in poetry, I'm very definitely looking in, and I'm capturing those moments, and I seem to be drawn to moment, to look, to observing, and especially when I was writing those poems based on photographs and paintings, I was definitely on the outside looking in, and I made a very conscious decision that I was going to be an outsider. Um, I wasn't going to put myself into those poems.
Yeah, they're lovely. And poetry is definitely a room an element where you feel at home. Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, I have a question too, more of an observation perhaps, but is there anyone else in the room who has comments or questions for Arja?
Yeah, I think I've got a question for Arya, but I'm quite happy to go after you, sir.
Well, thank you, sir. Gary, it's good to hear your voice. I think like Jacques, I was very moved by the relationship poems, and also really appreciate your style of writing, Arja. Very direct, very unpretentious, and something which I found quite intriguing, quite interesting, was that many of the poems seem to be a kind of sifting through experience, making sense of experience, orientating oneself. It's there already in the title of Where We're At. And Malaga Night or Nights, and Yet I Don't Know Where I Am is the ending of the poem. And that happens in the later poems as well. But the language used to describe many of these things is paradoxically always keenly observed. And so that's just a very interesting thing for me, that you use this very precise language, very direct, and yet a lot of it is navigating uncertainty. So I don't know if you have a response to that.
Well, on the direct front, I really like direct poetry myself. I don't like poetry that tries to be clever, tries to show you how educated you are, that you know ancient Greek gods and what they meant, and obscure Greek gods and all those things. I find that poetry, it's not for me, and I don't resonate with it. So in my own writing, I've always tried to be very direct, very clear, very it's a horrible word. Perhaps it's the right word, but very simple. I want people of all education levels and all levels to be able to read my poem and not to feel put off by it. And I mean, one of my things is that I think a lot of people are put off by poetry after they leave school or whatever, because there is so much poetry out there that is contrived and being clever, and is not putting the message forward, or not putting what the person wants to talk about forward. So that's why I am very, very direct. And I think I do observe quite keenly and quite vividly. And a part of that also is I do keep a journal. I've kept a journal since I was 11 in 1983. And I find that keeping a journal sharpens your observation muscle, let's call it that. And so you remember things that you perhaps would have forgotten. You read over it, and then you obviously remember more. And certain things just stick in my mind. And I suppose I'm also very visual. I do see things in pictures, and remember, which seems quite. I mean, I don't think everybody always thinks that way. You know, I mean, we are different. Some people feel things more, or they think in touch. And I mean, you know, there've been studies done on that, which I can't quote or anything. But I mean, we all see the world differently and experience the world differently.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mm.
Gary, you're up.
Cool, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, can hear
Okay,
you.
great. Right. Okay, Arja, first of all, I must say I've always been impressed by the fact that your poetry is extremely courageous and in dealing with emotions and relationships, and also generational issues as well. And as you say, your poetry is pretty direct, simple, not don't mean that in a derogatory way, but simple, it's clear. And there's no complicated mental gymnastics that one has to work through in order to comprehend the poem. But and as you pointed out, your poetry is very visual. There's a lot of imagery, very strong imagery. It's not abstract. So having said that, a very common thread I've picked up in your poetry over the past 20 odd years is food. Food always plays a very big role in your poetry, whether it's munching a sandwich on in the Paris metro, or munching a sandwich in the London tube, or having an apple in the Joburg lunch hour, or making a meal at home before watching a half Japanese movie. So yeah, food. Yeah, any comment on the food imagery in your poetry? Very rich imagery.
I like to eat. You know, food is very important to me. I mean, that's a very basic, simple thing. I once went on some tablets that took my appetite away, and I was horrified. I wanted to eat. And I think food is such a fundamental part of our lives, and it's pleasure. And food can also be representative of love. Somebody cooking a meal for you or taking you out for a meal. We celebrate our lives with foods, like his birthday in that poem. We celebrate big events with food. We celebrate weddings, book launches. We have food afterwards or before, whatever it is, and go out for a meal afterwards. So I think I'm not a gourmet cook. I'm barely a cook, although I can feed myself. But I like different foods and different cuisines, and I like traveling to different places through the food that you can eat. And of course, I like traveling overseas, and then you can eat weird food like I did in Jakarta and Bali, fruits that looked like strawberries that had a hard skin, which I can't remember the name, and all sorts of things. So I think food is quite central to my life, as evidenced by the fact that when I lost my appetite, I was horrified. Yeah. Mark, you had a question too.
Yeah, I did actually, and I still do, because you've answered many of the questions I was going to ask. And I just, if I can make a quick little observation about the fact that you're a photographer, and I know everybody's mentioned the fact that your stuff's very visual. It's visual in such a personal way that it does feel like we're looking through that camera at whatever you're looking at. And I really love that about your poetry, and I find it a very strong feature of it. But the question I was going to ask is, in fact, much more around the kind of Jewishness of your background, because I know that one of your parents was Jewish, and it's something that resonates with me, that I feel there's quite a Jewish flavor, even like a Johannesburg Jewish flavor, to the way you write and the way you see the world. And maybe because I said like that a little bit too. So I just find that's quite a powerful thing, and I just maybe thought you had some comments to make on that.
Well, first of all, thanks for your words about my poetry. Appreciate it. Yes, my father was Catholic, passed now. And my mother comes from Jewish stock, Jewish background. But I'm finding that you say that it's Joburg Jewish surprising, because my mother didn't bring me up following any religion. Her parents were still alive, my grandparents, and we would go to them for Yom Kippur and a Jewish meal, in inverted commas, if you know what I mean, for the Jewish high holidays now and again. But I wasn't really brought up Jewish, so I'm also a little bit of an outsider in terms of that. And when I've been to Jewish functions and people say the prayers or they mention something, I don't know. I just wasn't brought up in there. So that's surprising. But at the same time, I have been drawn to some Jewish themes, let's put it that way. Like, for example, Kissing the Wall. I mean, we're talking about the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem there. And then there's another poem in Beyond Touch called Nat Gutman's Wife. And that comes from a book of photographs by a Polish photographer. I think he was Jewish, called Vanished Worlds. And it's about the ghettos in Poland. And his name was Roman Vishnia. Anyway, it's in my collection. He took photographs of the ghetto and of a vanished world, because, of course, this was 1938, 39, and the Second World War was on the horizon, and those worlds disappeared through the Holocaust, through people when they were lucky enough to get out of those countries, etc., etc. So I am drawn to suffering, to the underdog, to like the elephant, an elephant chained up in a circus or having to perform. I notice it, I feel it. I personally can't do very much about it, but it does draw me, and I do see that kind of underbelly. And some of my other poems, like Retired, which is about a woman who's retired and she's got not much to do with her days, and she watches the TV and soap operas. And as I'm writing it, I do feel an empathy for somebody like that, for somebody who only had work, and now that work is over, has nothing else. She has her pension, which covers the basics, etc., etc., etc. So yeah, I'm surprised about the Jewishness coming in, but I suppose where you grow up does influence you. My grandparents were Jewish, and although they didn't go to shul when I was growing up, they had been, when my mother was growing up, they took her to shul and her two brothers, and it all kind of mixes into everything. I hope that answers.
It does, yeah. I think it is about the empathy, and also the sense of pathos with which you see things, which kind of, that feels it feels very congruent as a Jewish thing to me. I could be wrong, but that's just how it feels.
Possibly, yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. We have another hand up. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much, Arja. I absolutely found your poetry very fascinating.
Oh, thank you.
Please could you, very, very fascinating. Please could you tell us more about age and how that creeps up in your poetry and time? What I really want to know is, do you see yourself as a young at heart or an old soul? Because you have that kind of, you're on a spectrum at times. Where exactly do you see yourself now? Young at heart, old soul, and what age do you actually feel, and do you feel constrained by it or liberated by it?
Well, I think I'm a bit of both. I do think I'm an old soul, in terms of the fact that at 20 in fact, at the age of 10, I would see my mother's lines on her face, and I would go to the mirror and smile at the mirror to see lines appearing on my face, to see what they would look like. Of course, at the age of 10, when you do that, the lines immediately go after you've stopped smiling, because, young skin and all of that. But at the age of 20, I was already thinking, oh, the future. And 20 felt so old. I mean, as you can, I think a sense of that comes in. And of course, now I look at it, and of course, 20 is not old. But when you're 20 and you're looking back at your teenage years, you now suddenly entered adulthood, and that feels really big. And I was concerned about what were my 20s going to be? Where was I going to be at the age of 29? So I think I've always been aware of age and aging. And I had a mother who was very concerned with age and aging. I think it was very much a thing of her time. You know, she came to adulthood sort of the 60s, and women had to be young and had to attract men and all of that. So she was very aware of her body type, aging, lines on her face, being skinny, and all of that. What age do I feel? It's really, really strange. I mean, I don't feel the age I am now. I actually feel more like sometimes I feel 42, and in dreams I often am like in my 30s and 40s, and I'm often in my 20s in my dreams. I'm not quite sure why that is. I am never the age that I am in my dreams. Um, but I think I'm a little bit more released from what I was concerned about when I was in my 20s. I'm not as concerned about turning 60, for example, or 70. I know it's going to happen, and it's okay. And I'm okay being the age that I am now. I don't feel anxious about it. It is what it is. And of course, I've learned many things through the years and all of that. And so I'm quite comfortable being the age that I am, although in my dreams, never. I don't know why that is. But I don't know. I've often thought about that myself, but I am more comfortable now than at other ages. And I hope as you get older that you do feel more comfortable. And you do care less and less about what people think of you and all those things that are so paramount when you're in your teens and 20s, very often.
Hey, well, wonderful questions and responses. Is there anybody else who'd like to ask Arja a question? If there isn't, I'm happy to stop the recording, and yeah, we'll pause for a 5-minute break and come back for the open mic. We usually have 2 rounds. I think many of you know this drill, but hope to see you then at 2042 or thereabouts. Okay. Thank you, Arja.